Good morning, Highlands Presbyterian. On this Sunday in May, we are jumping back a little bit. We are in Genesis 28, and this is the story of Jacob's dream, of Jacob's ladder. It's commonly referred to. I was reading some scholars that come out and said the word ladder is really better translated as ziggurat, but I like ladder. That's what I grew up with, so I'm sticking with it. I don't think it makes a huge difference as to whether it's a ladder or a ziggurat or some other bridge between heaven and earth. So we're in Genesis 28, starting in verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it, and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in the way I will go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and the stone, and so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And the stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. There's a ton in this passage. We're not going to touch on all of it. But I think what stands out to me is this fundamental shift of this idea of angels and descending, and how different it is than how we think about achieving status. You know, I was waiting in line the other night for a flight to come back home, and the gate agent told a person in front of me they could only bring 2 bags on board, and they had 3 with them, and they had to take 1 bag and put it in another bag. And I've been in enough flights lately that I see it fairly often, and they say you can't go down the jetway until you only have 2 carry-on bags. And so people step aside and do it. And apparently for this guy, being asked to follow the rules was a massive inconvenience. And so he stood aside and was sort of angrily jamming 1 bag into the other. And then right before he walked down the jetway, he turns to the agent and says something to the effect of, how could you be so mean to someone who has diamond status? Clearly, the assumption was that because he had diamond status, the rules did not apply to him. He traveled enough on this airline that he should be exempt from following the rules. And my reaction was, I really hope my seat isn't next to this guy. It was an interesting display, right? So status is this interesting concept, and you see this from time to time, especially with the airlines and with hotels and these travel companies that provide different levels of status based on how much you travel. And the assumption, and you see it over and over again, is that someone who has achieved a certain status due to using a company enough, that they basically get to do whatever they want. And they tend to often throw a fit when it is they do not get what they want, right? Status is so interesting, the way it impacts us. I remember a few years back, someone came up with a way to calculate status. You got a score based on that kind of showed how much influence you had based on various social media followings. And I don't really understand how it worked, which goes to show how important I am in the status realm on social media. But I'm not immune from desiring status, right? It's a concept that cuts across all of us, right? All of humanity, right? It's not just about having a desirable house or car or job title or sort of markers of status, right? But in modern America, it's much of those things. But, right, social groups strive for status, right? They want to be desirable compared to others. Countries do this. It goes all the way back. I was thinking about the Tower of Babel, right? That early in Genesis, right? The people decide that they're going to build a tower to the heavens so they could elevate their status, so they could be equal, right, with God, right? Unhappy with their situation, they want to elevate their status, right? It's sort of the same thing that Adam and Eve did in the garden too, right? They're trying to elevate their status so their knowledge is equal with God's. They want to be on equal footing. They're not satisfied with their current status, so they want to climb the ladder, right? So many of us are trying to climb often different ladders for different reasons, right? Think about climbing the corporate ladder. It's all about gaining status in the company so you can make it to the top, right? You see it in the church world too. The joke is that no pastor is ever called to a smaller church. I've seen many a church resignation letter from colleagues, and it kind of seems to be true, right? We dress it up in different ways, but that's kind of the heart of it. I remember when I was a pastor of a small church in Tennessee, I was envious of my colleagues at larger churches because being a pastor of a larger church carried a status with it that I didn't have. So the question is what status are you seeking? Right? What is it for you? What's the thing in your mind that you think in life grants status to someone, and what makes you envious? Right? Naming things gives us power over them when we recognize them, right? So much of sin is the reason that sin is successful at eroding our hearts is because it happens in secret, and so it builds its power and influence over us. So when we name our sins, when we name our temptations, we gain some of that power back. And so when we name the status that is driving us in areas of our life, right, we gain some power over that. Right, so again, status, we're thinking of as a ladder. In today's scripture, it talks about ladders, and it does so, and it shows us a different path, right? And first of all, we start with the foundation that Jacob, our main character in the story today, is a trickster at best, a scoundrel at worst, right? If you're looking for someone to hold up as an example of moral behavior and honest pursuit of God, Jacob is not it. Right? Jacob is probably who you would exclude from the conversation and say, we're not going to talk about Jacob. But God chooses Jacob, right? God chooses the man who, right, buys his brother's birthright for a bowl of stew, exploiting a situation. God chooses Jacob, who steals his father's blessing by deceiving his father and taking advantage of his fading eyesight. Right? Jacob is, again, scoundrel, trickster, depending on how you want to look at it. But he takes advantage and gains power over his brother. And eventually his brother Esau is fed up and he's ready to attack him. And so Jacob flees. And here we find him today in the midst of a 550-mile journey to Haran. And in the midst of this journey, fleeing from the results really of his actions, he has this dream where God talks about this tremendous blessing that God wants to pour out on Jacob and on his family. God offers this blessing, and he does so, and he gives him this vision of a ladder, right, with the bottom set on earth and the top reaching heaven, and angels of God are ascending and descending on it, right? This is the dream of Jacob's ladder. Again, angels ascending and descending. And so it's not a simple, you only climb the ladder, you gain status, but angels are descending on it too, right? And so it's a little different than what we talked about, sort of climbing the corporate ladder. And other religions may tell you that what you need to do to earn God's favor is to perform rightly, to do all the right actions, and to do so you climb in the religion. And essentially it's a status encouragement, right? If you perform rightly, you'll climb in the religious ranks and gain more favor from God. Right? In some ways, it's sort of the Tower of Babel, right? Using your actions to build a tower towards the heavens. If you live rightly enough, maybe the top of your tower will be enough that you'll reach the heavens and you'll be let in, right? Simple enough premise. Right? But what pressure? Right? We look at the life of Jacob and we say, it doesn't seem like he could have get in. It seems like every other step he took, one of them was wrong. Right? And if Jacob, who's one of the patriarchs of Judaism, couldn't get in, what hope do you or I have? Right? I wouldn't have any, right? My own envy, my own worldly status seeking, right? My efforts to build my own tower, right, would eliminate me from reaching the top. But Jacob's dream isn't about a ladder where people simply ascend, right? That's not what the story is about. Or people getting away from the earth into heaven. Instead, angels are ascending and descending. It's a two-way street of a tower, of a ladder, with its feet set on earth and its top in the heavens, right? And the angels of God are not staying in the heavens waiting on people to accrue enough status to reach heaven, but rather they're descending to be with the people. Right? Suddenly access to God isn't a status play where you try and make your way up the ladder. But we realize that God is descending the ladder to be with people, to be for people. Right? And if God is descending the ladder, that means that God finds you wherever you are on the ladder. If you're up near the top, if you're in the middle, if you're fallen at the bottom and you tripped on the first step and you're rolling away from the ladder, right? God is descending and God will find you. Right? The shepherd seeks you out, leaving the heavens, descending towards earth. Makes me think of in National Lampoon, which the Christmas Vacation, which is an annual Christmas Eve tradition in our household. And so we watch that, and there's a scene in it in which Clark Griswold is putting the Christmas lights on, and he's got the ladder, and he's inching along the gutters, and then he falls away, and eventually the ladder falls, and he's hanging onto the gutter by his bare hands, and eventually the gutter falls away, and he is in the bushes in pain, far away from the ladder. And if you're in that place, right, God descends and God finds you. Right? Even if you're not entirely certain where the ladder is, God is descending on the ladder to seek us out. Right? This is what sets Christianity apart, the central idea that God comes to us, Emmanuel, right? God with us. Right, and all of Jacob's dream in Genesis 28 is pointing ahead in centuries about what will one day be true, that the realization of his dream will be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Right, in verse 17, Jacob says that he realizes that the dream he had, that the place is the gate of heaven. Right, in John chapter 10, what does Jesus say? He says, I am the gate. Right? He is the one through whom we pass. Right? And it comes to us. Again, it's not a gate that we have to climb a ladder and seek out in some great adventure. Right? The gate comes to us. And the passage that in John 1 that we're going to read in worship is so fascinating because Jesus is talking to Nathanael. And he tells Nathanael that he will see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man, on him, right? So Jesus in John 1 is referencing this dream that Jacob had and saying the dream that he had was pointing ahead to Jesus Christ. He himself is the ladder that bridges the gap between heaven and earth, that allows, right, the fullness of God to come down and dwell among us. He is the one who comes all the way down the ladder, who descends all the way down, so that we might be lifted all the way up. Right, Jacob, he names the place where he dreams Bethel, which means house of God. But Jesus is telling Nathanael that he is the new Bethel. He is the house of God. And it's not just a place, but it's a person who comes to carry us up the ladder, to present us to God. Right? Jesus is the gate. Jesus is the ladder. So religion isn't just an attempt to gain status and try to figure out how to climb the ladder, but it's humbly accepting that we can't build the tower on our own, that we're not going to ascend the ladder to reach the heavens, but instead Jesus Christ descends, bridges the gap, and makes us acceptable to God. Right? It's not our status, but the status of Christ that determines the outcome. right? And it's important because what this means then, right, is that we don't have status on the basis of which to judge other people. We don't have status by which we can claim privilege over anyone else. Because it's so easy that we do that. We judge others. It's so easy to do, right? We look at the life of Jacob, again, a scoundrel, a trickster, and we silently give thanks and we say, well, I'm glad I'm not that bad, right? We rank ourselves when we see the bad behavior of others. It's why when we look at the lists of, that Paul makes in the New Testament on various sins, we sort of pick and choose. And usually we say we pick the sins that we don't do and we focus on those and we ignore the sins that we do commit. Because not committing certain sins we think gives us status. But again, we don't have our own status to hang our hat on. We have only Christ, the one who descends to carry us up the ladder. Right? And so when we never assume that we have status over any other person on the planet, when we recognize we have been saved by grace, what happens is we never expect anyone else to serve us, and we recognize that not having status, we then look to serve others. This is the kind of people that we become, the kind of community that we become when the gospel truly settles in the depths of our hearts and our beings and defines us as a community, as we are the type of people always looking to serve others because we have no status by which to claim that others can serve us. And God is setting us up for that even here in Genesis 28, right? God says, He offers this tremendous blessing. I will give you, the land in which you lie, I will give to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, spreading to the east and the west and the north and the south. And what happens? Because of that, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Right? Because of the blessing that is given to us, then others will be blessed. It's like Martin Luther, who talked about how we receive the blessings of God with our hands open and our fingers spread wide, so that the blessings that come into our hands run through our fingers into others. It's not about us. It's not about status. It's about service. We have no status. Christ has status, and we claim that. And so all we can do is serve, because we have no merits on our own. As we are then the type of people that go serve others, because God does this. And God does this before we can initiate. See, Jacob gets it wrong. He says, if God will be with me, then I will serve. If God, then I will serve. But God takes the first step. God initiates. And so we serve in grateful response. We give in grateful response. Right? Jacob says, of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. Sort of Jacob's response, if God. But God has already done all of this for us, given us the status, descended from heaven so that we may ascend, so that God can carry us up the ladder. So what else is there to do but to gratefully serve, to give back? So let us go and serve. Let us give back. Jacob says a tenth. We should start there. Right? Jesus always challenges us to give sacrificially, to give more. Let us pour ourselves out the way that Christ poured himself out for us. Thanks be to God.